Welcome everyone to episode 5 of the Ethnically podcast. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Rohit Sagoo. Now, Rohit is a children's nurse and a PhD student at the University of Bedfordshire. He qualified as a children's nurse in the late 90s and has practiced around hospitals based in London for 10 years. And after that, he has taught in higher education. In 2016, he started a grassroots community organisation, British Sikh Nurses, which addresses the health and wellbeing needs of the South Asian community and support personal and professional development of qualified nurses. His organisation has raised awareness of organ and stem cell donation, mental health, and promoting healthy lifestyle choices, as well as supporting the community during the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2021, Rohit won the Royal College of Nursing Leadership Award and the London Faith and Belief Award in 2018. He is also the 1,514th Point of Light Award by the Prime Minister in 2020. British Sikh nurses were highly recommended for the BBC Make a Difference Award in 2023 and were finalists for the Nursing Times Awards in 2023. Rohit was named one of the top 75 influential nurses in the UK by the Nursing Times NHS 75 Nursing Awards 2023. So that's a bit about Rohit. Rohit, do you want to do a quick hello and say welcome to our listeners today?
Yeah, thank you. Hello, and thank you for welcoming me on this podcast today as well.
It's amazing. It's a pleasure to have you. And I'm really excited about today's episode because I think you'll bring a really interesting perspective, not just on healthcare, but around the Sikh community in particular. And so I'm just going to get straight into the questions I've got prepared for you. Nothing too crazy, but it's just really to get to know you better and also to hear about your inspirational journey. So I guess my first question is, what inspired you to pursue a career in children's nursing?
I was one of the first British-born South Asian male pediatric nurses in the country, and this was 26 years ago. My God, I've been nursing for children's nursing for 26 years. It's fantastic. So, initially, as normal South Asian families go, why don't you want to become a doctor? Got to my A-level choices, did my A-levels, then university. Why don't you want to become a doctor? Actually, to be honest, I actually wanted to break glass ceilings and be the very first South Asian male midwife. And then I posed that question to my parents and they were like, no, kind of change your career. But then I said nursing. So I went into nursing. I actually enrolled on the course to do mental health nursing first. And then within 6 months, I did a mental health placement and I didn't quite like it. I ended up getting asthma because a lot of the mental health patients were smoking. Back then it was allowed that you were allowed to smoke on the ward. So there was lots of smoking around and ended up developing asthma as well. So I thought, no, I kind of need to diversify and change a bit, but stay in nursing. Then had the opportunity to do children's nursing and I absolutely fell in love with it. So I had my first placement. I went to a nursery, really just enjoyed engaging with the young children, doing activities with them. And I kind of thought, this is for me. Just went into children's nursing and never looked back since. It's been a fantastic career, a wonderful career. So I spent, the first decade of my nursing career in children's wards and A&E, working for I specialised in adolescents. So we worked with adolescents for quite some time and Teenage Cancer Trust Unit as well. And actually, you know what? It was fantastic because it makes you think about adolescents, because most of children's nursing, they kind of look at children, you kind of think of youngsters or children under the age of 16. You never really think about the adolescents. And I was a really strong advocate for the adolescents in terms of, you get ill. I mean, the way I looked at it, a lot of people used to turn around and say, children's nursing, and it must be really sad for you and etc. But actually, you know what? You do see some children that come in for the day, go away and they're actually fine. Some children come in for a while and they, have some long-term condition that you could, some short-term condition that you can sort out. But there are a handful of children that do depart and go to heaven, and it does become heartbreaking. And you make, real rapport and trust with the families and children as well. But actually, when I got posed that question, it must be difficult. Actually, it's not. So if you really think about it from one perspective, we're all children once. We're all adolescents once. And actually, if you ask most general public, when did you go into hospital as a child? It would have been for appendicitis. It would have been for diarrhea and vomiting. It would have been for, a leg break or an arm break or something like that. So it wouldn't have been for something long term. And there are, a handful of children, quite a few children that do have long term conditions and cancer and etc. as well. But actually, for the majority of us, we would have probably just gone in for one day and come out, and that's it. And children are there to get better. So if you think about it, actually, you know, we only really look after the children that come in for acute stuff, and actually we look after children that come in for long-term stuff as well. So, and majority of us grow up probably not going into hospital very much as a child, unless you've got something, an ailment that makes you want to go in, that you need to go in all the time. But actually majority of us probably just visit the hospital, in and out, in, out, operation, done, that's it, tooth extraction, done, and that's it, over and done with. So actually as children, that's the way I look at it. Majority of people don't. And so children's nursing is a joy when you see that as well, because the quote, there's a colloquial say, there is a kind of saying in nursing that actually children are there to get better, but adults, they, it's a different ball game with adult nursing.
No, that's really interesting. I think it's really powerful to hear your perspective on children's nursing, and I think the sort of framing that you answered the question in terms of like, yeah, children are there in hospital to get better, and I think you sort of talking about it as an empowering experience rather than one that's really sad that you told that a lot of people kind of asked you. I guess a kind of in follow-up question, because I know you transitioned into further education and higher education teaching. So how did those experiences influence that decision to move into teaching?
Did nursing for 10 years on the wards. And actually, during your time as nursing as a professional, you teach children's student nurses. So all the student nurses, children's nurses are students, you're kind of mentor them, and you go through preceptorship training with them. And also actually the newly qualified children's nurses as well, you're kind of helping training them or advancing and developing their career as well. So I kind of fell into teaching that way. I started off teaching in further education actually, because I really liked working with adolescents, and there was an opportunity to teach health and social care at level 2, the BTEC, and level 3 as well. And that was totally out of my depth. I was like, oh my God, it's easy to teach on the ward when you're teaching clinical skills and practical skills to nursing students who understand anatomy and physiology and to understand, the process of what you're doing. But actually, it's a very different ballgame when you've got, I got offered the opportunity to teach 2 days a week. So I thought, fine, let's do this. And, it's a different ballgame when you're teaching 16 to 18-year-old in a classroom who aren't unwell, who are normal and well. And, and then you're thinking about classroom behavior management and all sorts of stuff as well, and progressing their learning. And because I'd spent many a year developing a rapport with teenagers, and, young adolescents, it was easy. I found it really easy to build that rapport. And I just escalated from there. So I spent 8 years teaching with, I spent quite a few years teaching with higher education and further education as well. So started to develop into higher education as well. And then I went into teaching children's nursing, and then going to university and just teaching children's nursing. And it was really good because it was a really humbling experience that you're giving back. And actually you're looking at the next generation of children's nurses and really developing their skills. And I think that's really key and fundamental. Because what we have in children's nursing, it's very bespoke in terms of children's nursing. So, you're looking after neonates, right from 0 to 18, or sometimes even beyond with some wards. Some wards, they may have patients that stay there till, 24. The World Health Organization defines, teenagers up to the age of 24. But we, as a nation, we define, adolescents up to the age of 18. When it becomes thereafter, you're a legal adult. And actually, it's very different in terms of it. And, it's such a wonderful career to give back as well. And then seeing your students go from the very first beginning of their first year to their final year, and then getting their degree and, going up on the podium or on graduation day, and they're successful, and then seeing them on the ward, working, and then seeing their career develop even further. So I've had my student nurses now, my first cohort of student nurses, they're now, they're now running the ward. They're now sisters, they're going to be matrons, they could be potential chief nurses. So it's fantastic to see their development. And then when you go back, as a link tutor, because one of the key roles in terms of teaching within the university is that you're a link tutor. So you go back onto the wards and you see how your students are doing. And whilst you're seeing your students, you actually see your ex-students, your alumni students that are actually running the place. And you think, oh my God, I taught you 4 years ago or 6 years ago, and you've developed your career so much. And it's fantastic to see. And it's a rewarding point in your life where you think, you've made a small contribution to their learning and their development. Because much of what they've done is by themselves. As you know, if you're a university student, all your lecturers are mainly your inspiration and facilitators and guide you to your learning. The actual learning is done by you as a student, and your progression is you as a student. So it's nice to see that.
Yeah, no, I think it's really powerful, your transition from healthcare and working in nursing to teaching, and kind of, I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of the care and attention you need in order to support a young person, whether that's in the hospital or in the classroom. So I thought that's really powerful. And I guess one of the other questions I had prior to hearing your story, and I think it's one of the biggest interests I have in your story, Rohit, is that you founded British Sikh Nurses, a really powerful organization, one that I've really been interested in learning more about. So if you could tell our listeners what British Sikh Nurses stands for, its purpose, but also what was, again, similar theme to the first few questions, what was the inspiration behind setting up?
British Sikh Nurses is one of the first, and I think only, faith-based nursing organisations in the UK. I started it up in 2016. I'm of Sikh religion. I went to the Gurdwara, which is a Sikh temple. I say that loosely because I don't want to get shot around inside it. But and I just saw the rates, and reading research as well, I saw the rates of obesity, the rates of type 2 diabetes going up in our community, hypertension, heart disease, stroke. And I sat there and I thought, I need to do something about this. There needs to be some change. There's got to be something that's got to be done. So I started British Sikh Nurses. I thought, okay, let's do this. It started as a one-man band, just myself. And then my wife helped, and she was fantastic. But it went on the premise of faith. I really needed the principles of Sikhi in there. And one of the key principles of Sikhi that I've embraced within British Sikh Nurses is the concept of Sewa, selfless service. And I think that was paramount in terms of what I wanted to do. So really, it was just a case of looking at how we could explore this and how we could do this. And it was just the most simplistic idea. Now with nursing, what we do is very simplistic, but the rationale behind it is what you really need to understand. It's very easy for us to take a blood pressure, but actually reading the blood pressure and knowing what the figures say and knowing what the anatomy and physiology is behind it is the rationale. So having understood that and taught that and etc., it was just basically get a table, put a blood pressure machine on, sit down, start taking blood pressure. And you know what? Not only did we do that, and the Department of Health and Social Care then got in touch with us and turned around and say, look, you've made some difference here. We'd like you to look at stem cell donation and organ donation as well. But just going back a little bit in terms of just taking people's blood pressures, we over the 8 years, we've probably screened over 4,000 to 5,000 people in that time. And actually what we found is actually that 30 seconds of putting a blood pressure cuff on you, I can ask you how you are. I can start some communication as well. I can find out exactly what you're going on. And the beauty of it is that you're in a Gurdwara, you're talking Punjabi, and you're talking to majority of those who attend the Gurdwara are probably over the age of 60. Okay, so it's the aging population that you're talking to, but actually you find out a lot about their history as well, and you find out a lot about them, and the communication is probably is really essential. And for them, for the people, for the congregation, the Sangha that we do it for, they feel comfortable. I'm seeing somebody that wears my own skin. I'm seeing somebody that has my own language, so speaks Punjabi just like I do. And I'm comfortable actually with them talking about any ailments that I may have. Throughout all those blood pressures that we've taken, astonishingly, and this was very surprising, we found that actually 60% of the congregational, the South Asian community walk around with undiagnosed hypertension. And that's phenomenal. You know, you have some, it's startling. And it's one of those key things that I've now talked to MPs about. And I've talked, really pushed the agenda with this and turn around and say, what do we do? So we do make appropriate referrals to their GP. So we go by the NICE guidelines when we're doing everything what we do. But then that escalated in terms of organ donation and stem cell donation. So we started talking to NHS Blood and Transplant about stem cell donation, organ donation. And this is just before Max and Kira's law that said it's a soft option for you to, get registered. And so we started increasing the registration and talking as well in Punjabi about it. And then looking at the what the Sikh says about it as well. So in organ donation is giving your ang, so in terms of what you do, but it's also Sewa. So we talked to many Sikh scholars around on this subject, from basics of Sikhi. We did a session with basics of Sikhi with them. And, it was very meaningful and informative in terms of looking at the religious aspect to it as well. But we started then the process of, getting organ donation. So then again, it was then setting up tables, just putting a banner up and just talking to people about organ donation. From that, the wonderful thing that happened is that we had families come to British Sikh person and say, look, we're looking for a living donation, and then we started a campaign. We had a wonderful family, a little girl called Anaya. She's not so little now, but a little girl called Anaya. She was 2 at the time, and her kidneys were failing, and she needed a living donor. So we started a campaign. We wrote Catalyst to start a campaign, and it pretty much went national. So hence why I can say her name. And she found a donor, and donor and recipient are both now doing well. And it's fantastic. From that, 9 families came forward. So we did stem cell pleas for, raising the stem cell donation with DKMS, and looking after the families as well. And I think that really opened up a gap in terms of how many Sikh families and Punjabi families or South Asian families are suffering out there in terms of knowing, what they need, looking for a living donor. I mean, in terms of organ donation rates, there are around approximately about 5 to 6,000 that are looking for organ donation. I think it's a little less than that. But actually 1/3 of those looking for a living donor are from the South Asian population. And that's massive. That's looking at about 1,500 people looking for a living donor. So there's a huge gap in terms of how you deal with this. So it then looked at organ donation, stem cell donation. We then took it one step further, and then we started working with the Resuscitation Council and providing bystander CPR. So, we've done lots of work, and then we've worked with other organizations like Nishkam SWAT to do homelessness. So we looked at, their healthcare provision in terms of, providing healthcare for the homeless as well. So we worked with them. And we're currently working with 13 Community Clinic, which is a wonderful clinic set up across nationally, most Gurdwaras that actually provide medical screening, and also coupled with that, actually lawyers and welfare as well. So they look after everyone's well-being collectively as well. And yeah, we've worked with many really wonderful organizations over the last few years, and it's just propelled what it shows to me is there is a need, and a need to look at health inequalities within the South Asian community and address those health inequalities as well. And we've done it from a grassroots level. So, and it's about engagement with the community and face-to-face engagement mostly, and actually turn around saying to them, what can, rather, as opposed to saying, what can we do for you? We go the reverse. You tell us what you need and we'll be there for you. That's what it is. And from that, we've had those organ donor families come to us. We've had lots of other organizations come to us and say, can you do this? We need bystander CPR. We need this. And so, okay, we'll provide it. What do you need? Because I think what we, a lot of what we do within the NHS is reactive as opposed to proactive. So it's, almost you've got to wait for something to go wrong for you to do something and react from it. Whereas I'm of the thought in terms of grassroots organizations like ours, where we're proactive, we work co-productively with the community. We can work co-productively with the Sikh community, the South Asian community, and find out what their needs are and say, how can we address that? And that helps to tackle health inequalities.
Yeah, no, I think, sorry, I'm just digesting a lot of what you just said. And I think, um, I mean, there's a lot, and I think it's really amazing to hear, like, first of all, the proactive nature of yourself and British Sikh Nurses as an organization. I think that's a really powerful point. And it's actually a big theme that's come up in a lot of my conversations with guests that I've had work a range of industries around kind of not trying to be reactive to sort of inequalities in our system, but being more proactive, being the solution, being solution orientated. And I think I was really interested, actually. This is not a question I prepared, but you mentioned the organ donation and stem cell donation, sort of the challenges. I was wondering, is there a stigma around it in the South Asian community, in the Sikh community? Because I personally, I don't, my knowledge of organ donation and stem cell donation is quite limited. So if I wanted to know more about it, I don't know necessarily where I would go to find out more information. Or actually, I don't know if I'm a bit too scared to go to give my organ if I needed to, or stem cells, for example. So do you find that there's a stigma within the South Asian community?
There's not so much stigma. What there is lots of questions and myth busting. And within the South Asian community, the first and foremost question that revolves around the South Asian community is faith. Is it permissible with our faith? Is this allowed? Will it, for certainly the Hindu and the Sikh community, it's almost your soul reincarnation. Will we come back as something? Is this going to, and then is this going to affect us in terms of where we transition to after life, after death? Sorry. And so that's the first myth bust in terms of what we do. The second myth bust is and actually from a religious perspective, I can speak just on behalf of the Sikhi perspective, and the Sikhi perspective says, it's Sewa, giving your and the last thing is Sewa. Almost your body is just a vessel, but your soul transitions wherever it needs to go. And so that's it. So it's easy. It's easy. I can't speak on behalf of the Hindu but I could slightly in terms of the Islamic perspective. I know that we've worked closely with some muftis and imams around this as well. And from an organ donation perspective, I do believe there is a fatwa to turn around and say it's permissible within the Islamic religion as well. But don't quote me on it. Quote me on it. I think it's best to, from that perspective, it's best to get some more, research around you as well. But there's myth busting around that. There was also actually, because we're talking to a lot of elderly folk, it's almost turned around saying, if you talk about organ donation, are the hospital going to kill me? Are they going to, kill me quicker because they want my organs and stuff like that as well? So it's not true. There's a dedicated organ donation team. If you do want to donate, post life, you want to donate, then there's a dedicated team that comes in and they talk to you through. And actually, it's a soft option. So actually, family members can still say no. So I could be registered. I'm organ donor registered. And so if I I pass away, my wife could turn around and say, no, I don't want that. But they could say, well, that was Rohit's wish. But she goes, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And that's a soft option. So they do look at the family and they do turn around and say, okay, then we'll take that into consideration and say, no, that's fine. So it's not a case of like, once you've signed on the dotted line, that's it, you give your organs away. There is a soft option around it as well. The other thing around organ donation is, I think, the most taboo subject out of all of it is that we South Asians do not talk about death. We don't talk about our wishes at end of life. And that's regardless to whether you want your organs given or not. We don't talk about how our burials are going to happen. We don't talk about kind of things that we want to, the clothes that we want to wear. Don't think about the things that we want to leave behind, the messages that we want to give to loved ones. We don't think about that. I don't think, we don't have the courage to have a dinner, a coffee table or dinner table conversation about death. We'll talk about marriage. We'll talk about money. We'll talk about housing. Talk about all those lovely things that happen to people. And we'll gossip about lots of what's going around in families. But actually, we don't talk about end of life. And I think it's really crucial, because there are wishes, that people have that may be missed. I certainly have wishes, and I'd like them to be respected. There are certain people that you want to give something to in your will, or there are memories that you want to cherish, or you may even want to leave a video message, of who you love and want to do. And I think we don't have those conversations. And I think before we even begin, and this is what I was advocating for when we did organ donation. So we pretty much went on a lot of Sikh TV channels and South Asian Indian channels as well, and talked about organ donation. And I think the key thing, that message that I gave, wasn't about, okay, we need to, you need to give your organs away, when you die. It wasn't that. It was actually, you need to have the conversation about death around a dinner table. You need to bring that subject up, because you know what, it will all happen. It happened to all of us. We're here. We're all going to go. But actually, from your life, and what you've done, there may be certain wishes, that it might be that, not that I support Manchester United. That might be, I want, to wear a Manchester United t-shirt, in my coffin. Those are the smallest things that you need to think about as well. And we don't think about that. We don't have those conversations. And I think that's first and foremost that we need to do.
It's really I think it's really important that the conversations do that, because I think one thing that really resonated. Yeah, we always, as a South Asian community, and I can relate to my own family, we're always talking about kind of marriage, love, bit of gossip here and there. I don't know if it's something to do with the South Asian community, but it just seems to be kind of like a theme that kind of supports us. And I guess we're not very good at having those uncomfortable conversations, particularly around death. I guess a prominent sort of kind of realism for most people of death kind of came during COVID. And I guess a lot of communities and families had suffered a loss of loved ones through that period of time. And maybe that was a realization point for a lot of families, realizing the importance of death and like how life can be taken just like that. I was wondering how, because you mentioned earlier, and I know from your previous work, you did a lot to support the South Asian anti-communities during COVID. If you could touch more on the sort of community impact, particularly that British Sikh nurses had during that time, alluding to sort of the topics that you've already touched on around organ and stem cell connection as well.
Yeah, I mean, during COVID, obviously during lockdown, we worked with Nishkan Swap, and we delivered food parcels to those who are in need. And again, what was startling was and I live in West London, which is a very South Asian area. It's predominantly South Asian, and so you have a huge South Asian community here. And it was, again, very startling to see how many elderly Sikh families and South Asian families live alone and lonely. And so the food parcels that we were delivering, you know, it was almost, I so remember one Sikh family. I knocked on their door, gave them their food parcel, and you know, these are warm food parcels that we needed to give us the hot food, and that's it. And you know, I had a few more trips to do, but this man came out, you know, a turbaned gentleman came out, and his wife had been, you know, she'd been struck by COVID, and we needed to feed her, and that's it. But you know, I probably was at the doorstep for a good 25 minutes because he was lonely. You know, nobody to talk to, and this is the first person that they saw that talked to that delivered a food parcel, and we had probably the most engaging conversation in Punjabi, and you know, about his family, about his wife, the care that his wife needed, and you know, how, you know, distant he was from his family. And you never, you know, you have this notion with some South Asian families that we're very rigid, we're very solid, and we're very together. But actually, you know, when we delivered food parcels, you saw a lot of loneliness, and a lot of you know, Sikh families and a lot of South Asian families living in that loneliness as well, and not in touch with their loved ones. And that was difficult to fathom. That was, yeah, that was that there. I walked. That was, yeah, teary moments. There were some, you know, lump in the throat moments when we would deliver those parcels because, um, you know, you're really connecting with a community that I've just left alone during that time. Um, yeah, lump in my throat now thinking about it, to be honest. Yeah, and so, you know, and during COVID, we also, you know, worked with the Department of Health and Social Care. So we thought about, you know, the COVID-19 vaccine and et cetera, and the myth busting around the vaccine as well, and thinking about the vaccine as well, and talking about that as well. And then, you know, the distancing, the hand washing, and making sure everyone was safe at home as well. So there was lots of stuff that we were doing there, translating what the Department of Health and Social Care was saying into Punjabi and making sure our communities were, you know, getting the right message as well. And working with the Gurdwaras, especially to get the messaging across as well, because obviously some um, some places of worship were opened, but you know, you couldn't get food, or you know, you had to have some social distancing around there as well. And then, you know, really making people understand what's going on, what's happening as well, and connecting with the community to make sure they're communicated with. That was really key as well. So yeah, really helping the community. I think we came out and pretty much in force in terms of doing that. We worked with other organisations to really make sure that it's you know, cohesive working and collaborative working, and you know, really supporting each other.
There's definitely like, I think COVID has all really brought this to the attention, particularly for the South Asian community, the Sikh community. I guess that's the community spirit. I think a lot when you go to places of worship such as the Gurdwara or the Mandir or the mosque, you have that community within you to sort of get you through those tough times, and that I guess helps with people that are suffering loneliness because they can go to those places of worship and sort of feel that community spirit. And I guess that obviously has an in turn positive effect on their well-being, their health, their mental health. So it is, yeah, really like devastating to hear that COVID sort of took that away. And I think one thing you touched on was that the South Asian community can be really strong, but I guess there are pockets when there are challenges like COVID that come along that really, you know, shine a light on some of those challenges, such as loneliness, such as deprivation. I guess one of the things I wanted to ask, kind of following from COVID and sort of now we're probably, well, the NHS is definitely suffering the consequences of COVID following that. What are some of the lessons learned from COVID that you want to pass on to the South Asian community moving forward? And sort of how does that impact not just yourself, but the future vision for British Sikh nurses, as well as other nurses in the community,
I mean, from our perspective, over the last few years, we've now got 100 members within our organisation who are nurses, healthcare assistants, and volunteers as well. So, it's really about branching out to the community and really supporting the community as well, and giving key messages in terms of to the community as well. Um, and I think the most important is the discourse that you have. It's got to be Punjabi. It's got to be, you've got to, it's, it's having somebody of your own faith, of your own skin color, of your own language that can, be a trusted voice in the community. And I certainly think that, we've become a trusted voice in our community. And there's lots of work that we've done around it as well. Post COVID, we've done quite a lot of work as well. So, I think it's being prepared as well. So if anything should happen like this again, it's that preparedness. And I think that's really key, that having that preparedness as well. And I think, I don't like to use the word resilient very much, but actually the Sikh community are very resilient and very forthcoming. And certainly within the 8 years, the work that I've done within the Sikh congregation, the Sangat, actually they're probably the most, the most receptive people that actually, they'll take on if you're a trusted voice, they'll take on your information. It's up to them, what they want to do with that information as well, but they'll listen. And it's wonderful to see that actually, it's really collaborative working. It's at its finest, and community work at its finest as well, because, I'm just a small, British Sikh nurses, to be honest, is a very small spoke on a wheel, because with the notion of Sewa, there are so many Sikh organizations with the notion of Sewa that not just give food, healthcare, look after people's well-being, legal care, all sorts of stuff. So there's loads of organizations as well. So I'm just a very small small spoke in a wheel compared to very many organizations. And I think the most important asset that we all have as Sikh organizations together is that we, embrace Seva. We embrace that self-service, that it's all about giving back. And it's all about, doing what you need to for your community, and beyond that, for everyone's community as well. And I think that's probably one thing that's given the Sikh community a lot of strength and a lot of praise over the years as well. Certainly a lot of praise from awards, winning awards, being recognized. So, for instance, Casa Aid is massive. It's global. So it's recognized, throughout the whole entire world. And Middle Nurga service, each year at Christmas, they, host in Birmingham station, a Christmas lunch for all the homeless. That's slowly become from what it was to a fixed date in the calendar, and Birmingham and British Rail know about it. So, the Seva that we do within the UK is marvelous, and it goes beyond that. It goes, back across the country. And I think that's one of the things I'm proud of within Sikhi, is the Seva that we do.
It's really like touching, and that's the lasting message that I've got personally from today's conversation with you, Rohit. But I think particularly for listeners, it's definitely been a theme of conversations that I've been having with a lot of other guests. This idea of Seva, of giving back and embracing who you are to make those changes that you want to see in the world and in your community. In terms of Seva, I think we've got a lot of young listeners as well, those that are sort of starting their career and want to, change the world. Gen Z is kind of known as the generation sort of solve all the problems. But I guess what sort of advice, kind of coming back to the beginning of our conversation when you touched on supporting children and adolescents in hospitals, teaching and higher education, and now with British Sikh nurses, all of those sort of components of your career, what sort of advice would you give to those that are willing to, embrace Seva and support their communities?
My advice is everyone's got the opportunity to do it. You just need to inject a bit of passion. You know what? You could do the most simplest thing. I went to a nursing conference just a couple of days ago. It's a European nursing conference, and I talked about my work to the Europeans. And I just said, look, we did the most simplest thing. The most simplest thing is, how much does a blood pressure machine cost? £10 to £15. That's it. Okay. So you get that. You go to any institution, don't necessarily need to be a religious one. You can go to any institution. You can go to, get permission to just go to a child center, a community center, anything. Put a table up, put your blood pressure machine on, just start taking people's blood pressure and talking to them. And that's it. Obviously, you need to be qualified in terms of what you need to be doing, but that's it. But it's that simple. Even with food, if you can, if you can save a little bit, then start to think about food banks or etc. or giving food. A lot of the Sewa as well, not from some of the obviously there's some big organizations do it, but actually some people put really small, just cook in their kitchen sometimes, and they'll just put plastic pots of food in the kitchen and just go out there, put a table up in the town, get permission, and that's it. Give the food away. That's how simple it is. And I think with your generation, content creation is massive. It's about that content creation and saying what you're doing, and making sure. And social media is such a powerful tool in terms of just disseminating. It's good and bad with it, but actually for the good things that people do, that's what you can really, have massive exploration in terms of what you need to do. It's the most simplest thing, I think, doing Seva. You could volunteer, you can do all sorts of stuff that you want to do. And, time is the biggest thing, and opportunity as well. Okay. And so that's up to you. That's discretionary. That's on your life. It's on your time and whether you have time for it to do that as well. But I think there's always opportunities to volunteer for other organizations like Nishkam Swap or Midland Hunger Service or 13 community clinics. So you can always do that. And that's only a couple of hours, probably in a month, that you need to spare. And so once you spare that, that's fine. But I think the beauty of it is you get real, you work with people and you work together and you're all in the same boat, just wanting to help people. And that's free. That's absolutely free. And if you enjoy it, then go for it and do it. That would be my advice to everyone in your generation. Just do it. If you've got spare time, just do it. And actually, sometimes you do it without knowing as well. If you're at university, you join a society, that's voluntary. And if you help out within that society, that's voluntary. So you're kind of helping your own and bringing lifting and rising everyone at the same time as well. So there's many ways of doing it. You don't go for the fame for it, because that's just not worth it. But just do your work and leave a legacy and turn around and say to yourself, okay, I've done this and that's it, and it's been wonderful to change somebody's life. You could change one person's life or you could change a few people's lives, but actually making that change is the most important bit.
I think it's really powerful advice. I think the point on content creation actually is really, really interesting, because I guess that's another way of sort of touching as many people and communities as possible and sort of having that impact. I think as well, I didn't really, I joined a few societies myself personally. I didn't really think of it as giving back or volunteering, but actually it is. And I think it's kind of, there are so many opportunities, I guess, out there for young people to take those volunteering opportunities and take advantage of those. So I think that is really insightful advice, and I think definitely will have lasting impact on our listeners. And in terms of, just to summarize, I think I've got two more questions. One of them you're gonna like, one of them you're not gonna like. Well, actually, you all like this question, but what I do is I ask each previous guest to provide a question for my next guest. So my previous guest on the Ethnically podcast was Nafisa Anwar, who you know quite well, and her question around the theme of ethnically, which is like talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, social impact. Her question was, in terms of this work around supporting communities, breaking down barriers, systemic change, it's really draining. It can take a lot out of you. So her question was, how do you keep yourself motivated despite all these challenges, despite, it is draining work. How do you stay motivated to continue doing that work?
From a faith perspective, Simran keeps my perspective there. Having the bot, so the Sikh prayers on in the morning, each morning, Having that on keeps me grounded, keeps my purpose. My wife is my backbone, my left and my right arm as well. I can't breathe without her and function without her. She keeps me grounded and guided as well. And she's not a nurse, and she's accompanied me to probably 90% of the drives that I've done for organ donation, stem cell donation, and health screening and stuff like that. So, and she's Sikh as well. So, having that keeps me grounded as well. The other thing is motivation, to keep striving as much as you're doing. To give you an insight in terms of I've got many fingers in many pies. To give you an insight, so as you said in your introduction, so I'm founder and director of British Sikh Nurses, which have been running for 8 years. I'm also now in my final 6 months of a funded PhD with the University of Bedfordshire. And so I'm writing up as well. So that takes most of my time. That's my full-time job. So I've taken a sabbatical from my, taken leave from my lecturing and just doing this as well. So that's massive, mountainous in terms of that job as well. And then on top of that, actually, I do other things. So I'm also a director for World Senior Snooker, and I'm also a director for the English Board of Snooker as well. So that's been my passion in terms of snooker. So for me, that bit's relaxing. That bit's wonderful. I can take myself and navigate myself out of what I'm doing. And yeah, I get inundated with emails saying, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. But I think, for me, I was at the very beginning of British Sikh Nurses, I was saying yes to everything. But now I found courage to say no to some of the things that I need to say no to, that I don't have the capacity for it. But then I also think about my enjoyment as well. So at the end of the day, you've got to spend some leisure time, spending time with family, my wife. And also, the other thing I have passionately as well is I'm a trustee for a very wonderful charity called Let's Talk About Loss that looks at young grievers between the 18 to 35. So that keeps me in check in terms of really thinking about people's lives and how much, they endure with a loved one passing away, and especially for young people as well. So that keeps me grounded too. So all these pockets of projects, sometimes I get told, where'd you get the time? But you do find the time, and navigate yourself in terms of the time as well. And it's nice because I can disseminate some of the work out. And as myself and Nafisa work together sometimes, and so she can help support me and I support her in terms of her South Asian Midwives as well association. So actually, yeah, it works nicely that way. Yeah.
I think it's pretty cool that, like you mentioned, lots of fingers and lots of pies. I think me personally, I'm quite similar. In terms of my own motivation, I like to have, if I'm not always busy, because obviously looking after yourself and making sure you do things such as snooker to keep yourself, entertained and relaxed. But I personally find that if I'm keeping myself busy doing myself involved in all these projects, such as my own podcast, I think that keeps me motivated as well to make change. So I think that is really, because I think a lot of us sometimes, and it kind of touches on the Sewa volunteering point we have been talking about. If you do have that spare time, that spare hour in the day, spare weekend to really give back or do something or make the most out of your time to keep that motivation for projects and areas that you are interested in. I think that is it's a really touching and powerful point that sort of summarizes our conversation today. So I want to thank you for sort of bringing that point really in this last question that I did just ask. And now it is your turn to ask a question for the next guest, who I will be recording the episode actually later this week. So they will be hearing this question very shortly. So around the themes of ethnically, we're talking about diversity, we're talking about community, we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about breaking down barriers, systemic change, and social impact. What question would you like to ask my next guest?
I think with the theme of South Asian Heritage Month coming up, and with the theme being free to be me, I'd pose a question to your next person on the participant on the podcast to say, how do you define, from a South Asian perspective, free to be me?
do you define free to be me from a South Asian perspective? Okay, that's really powerful. My next guest is from the South Asian community. That actually that does work quite nicely. Okay, free to be me. Do you have what is the sorry, follow-up question. What is the free to be me in
This
mind?
year's theme is looking at freedom and free to be yourself as well. So I think what we haven't embraced, actually we have embraced, but not embraced fully within the South Asian community, in terms of free to be me, is yes, it's free. It should be freedom to wear a turban or a geski. There should be freedom to wear hijab. It should also actually be freedom to be LGBTQ plus as well within our South Asian community, and acceptable as well. It should be free to have your voice heard. And I think, and we're seeing that. We're seeing a lot of South Asian voices being heard and being amplified as well. One of the things that we did, myself and Nafisa did, with Geeta from Irwin Mitchell for the very first time last week, was the first South Asian maternal health conference. And we had, a room full of mums, expectant mums to be, in the future, and talking about maternal health. And that was pioneering because it was the first one ever. And so that's part of Free to Be Me, where we look at women's healthcare as well. Because there's lots that, are, and when I think about Free to Be Me, I think about healthcare right from cradle to grave. And when we think about for example, when we think about women's health, we tend to concentrate on puberty, menstruation, and menopause. But actually, what about those over 65 that may have dementia, Alzheimer's, and women's health? They're more prone to cardiac arrests, and and just old age in itself as well. So I think there's a lot that we need to think about, and I think with the notion of Free to Be Me, I think we need to amplify lots of voices. Men's mental health is amplified by wonderful organizations like Taraqi and etc. They amplify men's mental health, but that's something that we don't talk about as well. Suicide rates within South Asian males, that perception of being the breadwinner, with South Asian males, and keeping everything quiet, domestic violence in relationships, sexual abuse, child abuse. We don't talk about child abuse within South Asian populations and South Asian families. And that, happens to somebody that you know. And so I think with that notion of Free to Be Me, we've got to amplify voices in areas that we find taboo, find difficult to talk about, including death, and that we need to start having those conversations.
Yeah, that provides really useful context because I personally myself don't know too much about South Asian Heritage Month, so that's something I will be looking into more post this episode. And yeah, no, it is those issues are really important. So I think that is a really powerful question to ask my next guest, and I'm really thankful that you asked that question. I think it's a really important one, and I think I'm really looking forward to the answer of that question. I'll definitely share that with you once the episode is out. But yeah, look, Rohit, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you today on the Ethnically podcast. You provided so much wisdom and care and love, but also you've been vulnerable and you shared your experiences, and we spoke about those stigmas, those taboo topics. You've covered, I think, pretty much every taboo topic that I could think of in the South Asian community. So it's really powerful, and I'm really thankful for your time today and our discussion.
Thank you very much.